Something is happening inside the Department of Justice that ordinary Americans aren't supposed to see. It's quiet. It's technical. It's buried in budget lines, personnel shifts, and decisions most people never hear about. But when you put those pieces together, the picture that forms is unmistakable and deeply unsettling. Imagine a system designed to protect the Constitution slowly being stripped of the very tools that keep it honest. That's what the senator was warning about, and the moment he laid it out, the room shifted. You could feel it, because this wasn't political theater. This was a roadmap of how a justice system stops being a justice system.
Question you about the policy at this point in time. I think you hear there's bipartisan disagreement here. But I do want to understand your view with respect to the appropriations law, because current appropriations law does require congressional authorization to make this change, to make this merger. And so my question to you as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States is, will you comply with the budget authorization law?
We will comply with the budget law. And you know, Senator, I'm glad you brought this merger up, because if I was still a state prosecutor and hearing this, I would be concerned too about what's happening to ATF. ATF will keep its brand. DEA will keep its brand. But what they're doing, they're going under one umbrella, doing away with the bureaucracy at the top. These agents are going, they want to be out hunting down criminals. That's what they want to do. They work, so much of this work is the same work, going back and forth. And now they will be working collaboratively together to keep America safe. And we're going to put hundreds of agents back, thousands, back on the streets, and that's where they want to be. And I would have had the initial concerns that you have about that. But give us a chance, let it work, let the DEA and ATF work together, get those agents out there, do away with the bureaucracy, and hopefully we will make America safer as a result of it.
Well, I will say that this wasn't just my reaction to the proposal. I was actually hearing from ATF agents as well. So again, we will obviously review that question in a bipartisan way on the committee, but I just wanted your assurance, and I appreciate it, that you'll comply with the appropriations law, which would require congressional action in order to go forward with that.
We don't need congressional action for this move, however.
Oh, well, I thought I just got clarification. Well, it's going to be important to both the chairman and myself to understand your position as Attorney General on whether or not you can proceed with this merger without congressional action.
We are keeping ATF, we are keeping DEA. We are putting them under the same umbrella within the Department of Justice.
So I'm not arguing with you here. I want to understand your position. I think it will be important to members on both sides of the committee. The appropriations law currently would require that Congress approve of this merger. And so my question to you as Attorney General is, do you agree with that or disagree with that?
We will complete this reorganization, and I'm committed. I will look at that under the law. We will not violate the law, Senator, and we will work with Congress regarding that.
No, I appreciate that. So the second point I wanted to raise had to do with the prosecution of hate crimes, and I share your vigor in wanting to go after and prosecute hate crimes. I would just point out that the budget that you submitted zeroes out funding for 3 of the DOJ hate crimes programs, the hate crimes training program, Shepard Bird hate crimes, the Javara Hire No Hate Act, and the community approaches to advancing justice. So I hope you'll work with the committee if we seek to restore funding for those programs.
Yes, Senator, I just pulled up the details of those 3. Let me see. I'd be happy to discuss those with you further.
Good. And finally, I want to go back.
All 3 of those.
Thank you. I want to go back to the issues of grant determinations, because I think there continues to be some confusion between grants that had already been obligated that were withheld. And to my knowledge, there are about 400 of those still pending. It'd be helpful to get from your team if you have a different number. And then there's what we call notices for information, which relates to notices for future grant awards in this current fiscal year.
Yes, there is a difference.
And so I understood your earlier testimony to say, with respect to the notices, you the department plan to issue those very shortly. Is that right?
Yeah, and Senator, yes, you are correct on that. We notified the affected grantees and members of Congress regarding the terminations and how to appeal. That was the $811 million of grants that were initially terminated in 2025. We're also talking about upcoming ones as well.
Right. So I want to leave this hearing with some clarity on this issue. So when it comes to the notices of funding opportunities, because the clock is ticking on this fiscal year, do you and the Department of Justice intend to quickly notify people of those opportunities going forward?
Yes, Senator Van Hollen, as I said earlier, and it will be done on a rolling basis, but yes, within the coming weeks, we are absolutely doing that, yes.
And so finally, on
a rolling basis.
On the other category, which are the grants that had been previously obligated, I do have concerns, Madam Attorney General, with the idea that the way we're going to get them to stop being withheld is members of Congress calling. I appreciate the invitation, and I will look to see if we've been hearing from people. But this category of grants relates to people who already went through the process and already had those grants obligated, and they're currently being held. So my question to you is, can you tell us how many are still being held today? And I don't like the idea that in order for somebody to get their withheld grant unheld, that they have to call a member of Congress. That should be, so how many are left? Do you know? How many of these grants are?
I don't know exactly, Senator, but I know many of them are the subject of ongoing litigation, so I wouldn't be able to speak of that in detail in this forum anyway.
Well, maybe just a follow-up, because it would be helpful to try to narrow the scope of this. Again, my understanding, and this was the subject of the letter I referenced earlier from a number of senators.
And I have not read that letter, but I will be happy to read that letter.
If you and your team could get back to us right away on that, because these are grants that, as the chairman knows, have been previously obligated, some many years ago, but frozen. And so the question is, how can we get them unfrozen? And members of Congress will call, but not everybody, can just call up their member of Congress or thinks of calling their member of Congress. We need a process that's fair to everybody. I hope you'd agree.
And actually, citizens have called as well.
Well, exactly. And so, exactly. So, but again, this is an ongoing issue. And I know colleagues on both sides of the aisle are hearing from it, folks. So, Mr. Chairman, unless something else comes up, that's it. And look forward to continuing the conversation.
It's not my intention to ask any topics or questions that cause you to come back again, but if I do...
Thank you, Senator Moran.
You're welcome, General.
He began by laying out something almost nobody wants to believe, that the institution tasked with defending the rule of law is drifting away from the Constitution itself. Not by accident, not through incompetence, but through deliberate choices that weaken its foundation. He described a department failing on every front, failing to uphold legal norms, failing to protect democratic processes, and failing to keep the public safe. And then he pointed to the budget that would make everything worse. The warning wasn't subtle. When the DOJ no longer sees the Constitution as the anchor, everything built on that anchor starts to tilt. And once it tilts far enough, it collapses. That he showed how the department seemed more interested in shielding political insiders than defending the country's legal standards. Not in the dramatic, TV-style way people think of, but in the slow, grinding reconfiguration of priorities, personnel, and enforcement. The kind of shifts you don't notice until their consequences hit the surface. He talked about how this erosion wasn't random. It was structural, something deeper than any single decision or misstep, something that rewired the institution in ways most citizens never examined closely. And as he spoke, the threads connected in a way that was impossible to ignore. One of the senator's most alarming points was the growing list of fired civil servants, people whose only mistake was refusing to mislead a court or refusing to bend ethical rules to serve political goals. He described prosecutors who were let go simply because they were attached to investigations the administration found inconvenient. He cited a whistleblower who said, "I didn't sign up to lie." Words like that don't come from political operatives. They come from lawyers who swore oaths to uphold justice, not to serve personalities or agendas. When truth becomes risky in a courtroom, the legal system ceases to function. It becomes a performance, one where the ending is predetermined and honesty is optional. The senator walked through a pattern that would make any constitutional scholar shudder. Attorneys pushed out not because they violated ethics, but because they followed them. Offices hollowed out until there were barely enough people left to keep the lights on. The acting pardon attorney removed after refusing a questionable request. Staff in immigration litigation punished for insisting on accuracy in court filings. These are not ideological disagreements. These are foundational cracks. Cracks that spread quietly until the structure above them starts to sag. And just when the audience thought he had reached the peak of the breakdown, he revealed the internal watchdog devastation. The department's public integrity section, one of the most crucial units for fighting corruption, was cut down to practically nothing. From roughly 30 attorneys to as few as 5. That isn't a budget adjustment. That's an amputation. And it wasn't the only one. The Office of Inspector General, the department's independent oversight engine, was facing a $42 million cut. Enough to eliminate 140 positions. Enough to freeze investigations. Enough to blindfold the people tasked with policing misconduct inside the DOJ itself. He reminded everyone that it was the Inspector General who uncovered the FBI's failure in the high-profile abuse case that shook the entire nation. Without that office, investigations like that would never have come to light. So when those positions disappear, oversight disappears too. When oversight disappears, corruption spreads. And when corruption spreads inside the department responsible for national law enforcement, every citizen becomes vulnerable in ways they cannot see and cannot control. Then he moved to the policy decisions, choices that didn't just weaken internal accountability, but actively helped foreign adversaries, drug cartels, and criminal networks. He pointed out that on the first day of this administration, the FBI Foreign Influence Task Force was disbanded, not scaled back, not restructured, eliminated. This was the office responsible for tracking covert operations by adversarial countries, nations known for aggressive espionage, cyber intrusions, and secret influence campaigns. He explained how restricting foreign agent enforcement sent a signal that these issues were no longer a priority. And when a government stops watching foreign actors closely, foreign actors become much bolder. He highlighted another shocking move, cutting the Drug Enforcement Administration. At a time when cartel-driven trafficking operations are expanding worldwide, shrinking the agency built to stop them isn't a cost-saving measure. It's an invitation. He described the complete removal of funding for the organized crime drug enforcement task forces, groups specifically created to coordinate federal, state, and local efforts against major criminal networks. These weren't abstract policy debates. These were real consequences, real gaps, real threats. Then he turned to firearms trafficking. The department's plan to effectively dissolve the ATF wasn't just bureaucratic tinkering. It meant collapsing the very infrastructure used to trace illegal weapons, locate trafficking rings, and stop guns from flowing into the wrong hands. Removing those capabilities didn't help law enforcement. It helped traffickers. It helped smugglers. It helped violent networks move more freely. And it left communities across the country exposed. As he spoke, you could sense why he was so frustrated. None of this looked like a Justice Department trying to make America safer. It looked like a department intentionally stepping back from duties that have always been considered essential to national security. And just as dangerous as weakening enforcement was the department's increasing refusal to answer to anyone that he pointed out that the administration had faced nearly 300 legal challenges. that judges appointed by leaders of both parties had issued restraining orders against overreach, that congressional letters, official oversight requests, were being ignored. 9 letters from him alone, 38 from committee ranking members. Only 2 answered. When a department stops responding to Congress, it's not just rude. It's unconstitutional. The DOJ doesn't get to choose which oversight questions it feels like answering. But this department did. And that silence wasn't accidental. It was strategic. That kind of evasion creates a system where power is concentrated in the hands of a few, shielded from scrutiny, and freed from accountability. And when you look at it all at once, fired attorneys, dissolved watchdogs, obstructed oversight, halted investigations, weakened enforcement, the through line becomes impossible to ignore. The senator wasn't just complaining about a broken process. He was describing a department being reshaped to serve loyalty instead of law. The most chilling part of his remarks came when he explained why this mattered for ordinary people. Most Americans never interact with the DOJ directly. They don't think about internal task forces or oversight offices. They assume the system works because it's supposed to work. But what happens when the mechanisms that protect them from abuse quietly disappear? When the people who would normally catch corruption are gone? When foreign interference goes unmonitored? When traffickers operate with fewer barriers? When transparency is replaced with secrecy? The impact doesn't hit the powerful. It hits everyone else. That he made it clear that the erosion of justice doesn't happen in dramatic explosions. It happens through the slow removal of guardrails until the road curves sharply and nobody's holding the wheel. Every agency oversight report delayed. Every attorney fired for following ethics. Every watchdog office gutted. Every unanswered congressional inquiry. Every unit disbanded. Every enforcement capability reduced. These aren't isolated incidents. They're parts of a design. And the moment he finished laying out the pattern, the real weight of his argument settled over the room. This wasn't about who sits in which office. This wasn't about ideology. This was about whether the justice system answers to the Constitution or to the people who happen to hold power. When a justice system starts shielding insiders instead of investigating wrongdoing, democracy shrinks in ways that are hard to reverse. Not impossible, but hard. Because rebuilding trust takes longer than breaking it. That's why the senator's testimony mattered so much. It wasn't a headline grabber. It wasn't a viral clip meant to spark outrage. It was a structural warning. A warning that the public needed to hear, even if it made them uncomfortable. Because ignoring these kinds of warnings is exactly how institutions crumble. And once a justice system loses its independence, it doesn't return on its own. It stays tilted until the public forces it upright again. So if you're watching this, don't shrug this moment off. Don't assume these issues sort themselves out. Don't think this is too deep in the weeds to matter to you personally. This is your legal system, your oversight, your protection against corruption, your shield against unchecked authority. The pieces being removed are the pieces that keep your rights safe. Pay attention to the cracks now, before the foundation shifts so far that fixing it becomes a generational task. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to subscribe, drop a like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the stories shaping the future of our institutions. Your engagement helps keep this kind of reporting alive, and together we can make sure the truth stays in the spotlight where it belongs.